Hi guys, Elena here. I have to apologize for the sound. I've spent hours troubleshooting and yeah, basically my microphone is much more advanced than my 6-year-old phone, and so they're not actually compatible. Anyway, so I'm gonna do my best to speak really loudly. All right. So today I want to, we're gonna basically do the same thing. We're gonna do a single round of sun salutations. And today we're going to focus on the major joints, so the shoulders and the hips, and really look at and feel into the alignment of those. So we're not going to work with intention too much today because I really want to focus on this. So come onto your mat and come into tree pose. Why do I call this tree? I feel like a tree. Whoa. Mountain pose, Tadasana. And we're going to work with uh, neutral or square alignment. So neutral alignment is what how most people call this. I sometimes talk about square alignment because if you imagine like a rectangle or a square here, if one hip is in front of the other, you're not square, right? If one hip is higher than the other, you're not square. But this is also called neutral. So here at the top of your mat, take a moment and tilt the top of your hips forward and the bottom of your hips or your butt way far back, okay? So this is very much not neutral. And then go the opposite direction. So you can even bend your knees to do this one if you want. But take the top of your hips way far back and push your butt forward, right? This is also not neutral. So somewhere in between way too far forward and way too far back is your neutral. What you want is a natural curve in the low back, and you want your hips, the top of your hips, if you imagine the bowl of the pelvis, right? The pelvis bones, your hips, your pubis, all of this. If you imagine it like a bowl and it's holding everything inside. Neutral is where the top of that bowl is level, is flat. So if you had a bunch of water in this bowl, none of the water would spill out. If you are too far forward with the top of your hips, the water would spill out the front. If you are too far back, the water would spill out the back, right? So neutral position, not too far forward, not too far back. And of course, the other reason that we talk about neutral is because your hips can go out of neutral in many directions. So we can have not neutral front to back, that's what we just talked about. Or we can also have one hip hiked up higher than the other. This is also not neutral. And sometimes we can stand, right, with a lot of our weight on one leg and the other knee can be a bit bent. And we often do this because like a lot of us will stand on our non-neutral leg or our non-dominant leg so that we are ready to move, right, with our dominant leg. So this is not neutral either. Neutral is both hips even, top to bottom, right? Okay. Another non-neutral is if you're twisting. So if you have one hip more ahead and one hip more behind, right? You're twisted. That's also not neutral. So the beauty of our physical body is that it can move in all kinds of directions, which is great. What happens, though, is that we have tendencies to be out of alignment, to not be in neutral. So again, some of us stand more on our non-dominant leg. And if you look at how I'm standing, this is putting pressure and weight on my left leg. And so my left leg is having to work to keep my body up. The other thing is, because I'm not aligned, the muscles, like my quads, are having to tighten and hold on. All the tendons and ligaments and muscles that are in my body inside here, both on my leg, all my joints above and below, including my spine, they're all that soft tissue is having to hold on tighter to keep me from falling over because I'm not aligned. If you can imagine a tower. I'm like a tower, like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, right? If the Leaning Tower of Pisa were in neutral position, it would be upright. But it's not. It's leaning to one side. And they actually talked about having cables to keep it up. Well, we don't have cables to keep us up. So, well, external cables. But we internally have a whole lot of things that act like those cables to keep us up. Because, of course, we don't want to fall over. So this is also great because it means we can stand any way we want. But if I've been standing this way for years, I'm overusing some muscles and underusing others. I'm putting a lot of stress and strain on the body to not fall over, right? And so what ends up happening is over time, I will have low back problems or maybe even upper back problems. Well, basically, you start having problems anywhere along this chain, above or below. And, when we're younger, we haven't been doing it as long. So we haven't stressed and strained these things as long. But as we get older, things start to hurt because we've been doing it long enough now that it's like, ooh, I have low back pain. Ooh, my feet hurt. Oh, my ankles, my knees, my hips, right? My shoulders, my back. So it's not that you want to be in neutral all the time, and move through life like that. We want to be fluid and flexible and moving and twisting and doing all these beautiful things. But at the same time, we want our general stance to be more neutral than not. And really the only reason for that is because that's when we're aligned. That's when the body acts more like a stack of blocks stacked on top of each other. They're not going to fall over. It's when your body is using the least amount of effort. It puts the least amount of stress and strain on any part of the body when you're standing in neutral, right? You have these natural curves in the back, so your spine isn't straight. There are natural curves. So there are natural, things happening. You're not ramrod straight. But still, if you do a line from your ear down to your shoulder, right, and then your shoulder down to the middle of your hip, down through your knees and down through your feet, your ankle bone, that should be basically straight. I mean, everyone is slightly different. But basically, that's the plumb line you want. That's the stack of bricks that you want. That's the middle. And that's neutral. And that's the easiest for your body to maintain, right? So we're going to go through this practice. And I'm going to have us really pay attention to where our joints are. And it's, again, not because you want to always be in neutral. It's more that if you bring consciousness, awareness to these two major sets of joints, your shoulders and your hips, and you do that throughout this practice, and then you take that awareness off the mat with you, you will start noticing, oh, check it out. I don't sit in neutral. No wonder my neck hurts. No wonder my shoulders hurt. No wonder my wrists, and my elbows hurt. I'm doing this, right? This is really hard on the body. Or, oh yeah, I'm always standing like this. No wonder my knee hurts. No wonder my low back hurts, right? So this is really about helping you gain awareness, okay? It's not about, oh my God, you should always be in neutral throughout your life or in every yoga pose, right? It's just about bringing conscious awareness to how you're moving through space during a yoga practice. So let's get started. So again, you're at the top of your mat in mountain pose. And take a second, put your hands on your hips and rock back and forth and find your neutral, wherever that is. And notice, of course, we have top of hips too far forward, top of hips too far back. But we also have one hip higher than the other, right? Your right hip might be higher than your left hip. You can find those the ischial bones right here in the front, the top of your hips, right? And if you have a mirror, this is even easier. Now you can see, is one of your thumbs higher than the other, right? And then you also want to notice if one hip is more in front than the other? Is one hip going forward into a twist and the other hip twisting back? Now, what I'm not requesting that you do is force yourself into some kind of neutral. Really what I'm asking you to do is become aware of what you're doing, right? And if you want, you can slowly start moving your body into your neutral. So if you, by habit, or you've been doing a long time, having this twist in your hips, it might not be a great idea to just crank back and try and hold yourself in that position. But what you can do is just start moving in that direction. Just start moving your body more towards your neutral. And the reason I say your neutral is because everyone's physical body is put together differently. Our joints are literally shaped differently. Every joint in every human is slightly different. So what that means is that my neutral in my hips and then the way that my spine stacks on top of my hips is going to look different than yours, right? So we can't get out a ruler and be like, you should have exactly this curve in your back. Can't do that. But you will have a neutral. Okay, that's a lot of talking. But you can understand the method to the madness here. Okay, so hands on your hips, find neutral, all these different directions. And if you're not naturally in your neutral, just begin pulling a little bit, using a little bit of muscle power to move you into neutral, a little bit, and just see what happens. And the next thing is your shoulders. And it's exactly the same. Too far forward, too far back, one higher than the other. That's super common. And/or one twisted forward. You can even, with your shoulders, go laterally right to left. You can also do that with your hips, too. There's all these directions that you can not be stacked, right? So play with your hips, and you've probably been doing that, so now notice your shoulders. Again, it's so nice if you have a mirror. I don't, but that's all right. You can kind of guess. Okay, so hands down, next to your side. Take a moment here to breathe. Gently pull up arches all the way to crown. If you're not sure what I mean, go watch the first video. Notice your breathing. All right. So breathe your arms all the way up. Stretch up softly. Take a moment here. What are you doing with your hips? Already we will start moving them. Breathe your hands together down in front of your heart. Take a moment here. Just notice, have your shoulders creeped up around your ears? If so, soften them. Just relax your shoulders. Let them gently fall into neutral. Good. Thank yourself for being here, for giving yourself this time. And then let your hands relax down by your sides. And slowly bend forward into forward fold, taking a moment to notice what you're doing with your hips as you go down. You can put your hands on your hips if you want. Notice with your hands on your hips, are you having a tendency to go out of neutral in any direction? And if so, softly pulling back. Okay, so breathe up to flat back, spine nice and long. Breathe back down, forward fold. Breathe back up the flat back. And breathe back down, forward fold. Good. Hands on the floor. Right here, before we step back, notice what you're doing with your shoulders. Because right here, right before we move, is often where we just go unconscious. And we have a tendency, a lot of us, to have our shoulders too far forward and/or cranked up around our ears. So take a moment right here and just let your shoulders relax back down. Now they're probably going to be a bit forward just because you're reaching down to the ground. That's okay. But just notice how you're holding and moving your shoulders as we step back. So breathe your right foot all the way back. Take a second here. Notice your shoulders. Are they down in neutral? And then before we do anything else, what's happening with your hips? Now, most of us in lunge position tend to take our right hip back, or the back hip back, right? And the left hip, the standing hip, moves forward. So now we're in this unconscious twist. So here, start to gently move your right hip forward and your left hip back. And if you're not sure what you're doing, again, feel your hips. Is one way far forward and the other one way far back or not? And just see. And take a second here and notice, how does that feel? Does that feel kind of weird? Or is that normal? Is this what you normally do in lunge? Or not? So again, we're just creating consciousness here. Okay, so breathe your knee down in the back and your foot flat on the floor, the top of your foot flat on the floor. And begin to breathe your way back. Just rock your hips back. Again, noticing, what are you doing with your hips? And breathing forward, just rocking your whole body forward over your knee. How are your shoulders? Breathing, rocking back. Good, breathing forward. We'll do it one more time. And just notice what you're doing with your hips. Good, and come back to neutral. Awesome. Okay, so plant your hands on the ground. Start pressing into your fingers. And even before we lift up our knee, notice where your shoulders are. Right? Breathe them into neutral. Curl your back toes under. Breathe your back knee up. And right here, get your shoulders as neutral as possible. Bend your elbows a bit if you want. And then breathe your foot back, downward dog. And notice how your shoulders are already in a good position for downward dog. Awesome. Bend your knees, push your hips back, pressing down. Now notice with your shoulders right here, of course we're pulling, we're stretching, but you still want width across your collarbones. You still want width in the back of your shoulders. All right, so even though we're stretching long, we're not scrunching up and collapsing our arms towards our ears. There's still a lot of space, a lot of breadth across the back here. Okay? Good. So again, we're going to rock forward to plank. Before we do that, start right now becoming conscious of your shoulders. And I even like, as we're moving forward, so breathing forward, I bend my elbows as I come into plank. And that allows me to adjust my shoulders. So here in plank, if you need to bend your elbows to get your shoulders where you want them, nice and neutral, we're driving back with our heels, arches the crown to support our pelvis and our back. My nice little fat tummy. Okay, here we go. Breathing down, all the way down. Good. Where are your shoulders? Is one of your hips higher than the other? Are they even? Good. And so before we lift up into baby cobra, take a moment and let your shoulders be nice and wide here. And we're going to use our back to lift up, not our hands. And this is why it's really nice to have your shoulders nice and wide here so that we're strengthening our back muscles in a nice wide open neutral position. So breathing up into baby cobra, lifting with your back, breathing back down. Shoulders nice and wide. Breathing up again. Breathing back down. And keeping your shoulders nice and wide, we're going to breathe up into plank. Good. Bending your elbows if you want to help position your shoulders. And then breathing back all the way to downward dog. And see how your shoulders are nice and wide. And you have less of a tendency to scrunch them up to your ears. This is perfect. And this also means that we're strengthening these muscles as we're moving through these positions in a nice neutral stance. This is a great way to strengthen your muscles. You don't want to strengthen them when they're all crunched up around your neck, up around your ears. Okay. So we're going to breathe our right leg up into the air towards the sky. And notice here, what I'm asking for is both hips to be pointed down. So this means that my back heel is highest. It's the highest part of my foot. It also means my leg doesn't go very high. So if I wanted my leg to go higher, I could twist my hips and raise my right hip higher than my left. But that's great, but that's not actually what I want here. So turn your toes down towards the ground and get your hips into a neutral position. Good. And then breathe your knee to your chest. Notice what you're doing with your shoulders. You want them nice and wide. Then breathing your foot back up, toes down, hips in neutral. Breathing your knee back to your chest. One more time, breathing your foot up to the sky. Breathing your knee all the way between your hands or your foot. Good. Where are your shoulders? And notice here, again, the tendency will be to have the right hip moving forward and the back hip moving back. So even them out. Move them into neutral. Strengthen them in this place. Good. And then breathing the back knee down and the top of the foot down. Good. And breathe, moving your hips back. Good. Hips in neutral, shoulders in neutral, breathing forward. I'm going to do that one more time. Breathing your hips back. Hips in neutral, shoulders in neutral, breathing forward. Good. Back to center. So again, right here, even before we lift up, really paying attention. Where are your shoulders? We're going to use them. Where are your hips? So curling your back toe under, breathing your knee up into the air. Good. So before we stand on our right foot, again, neutral hips, neutral shoulders, and we're going to, so breathe forward. You're going to stand up on your right foot, letting your left foot kind of drag, dangle behind you. Good. Just hold that for a second. And then slowly beginning to lift the back leg up. Good. And then if you're comfortable, the front, top of the body. Good. And see how we just prepared for that? This is much easier when your hips are in neutral. And so breathing back down, hands to the floor, breathing your back leg next to your front leg, forward fold. Breathing up, flat back. Breathing down, forward fold. Breathing up to flat back. Breathing down, forward fold. And then breathing all the way up. Hands reaching for the sky. You're welcome to back bend, side bend, or just straight up in the air. Whatever feels best to you. Good. Breathing your hands together down in front of your heart. And then letting your hands relax by your sides. Take a moment here and feel mountain pose again. Neutral shoulders, neutral hips. Okay, so let's do the other side. So breathing your arms up into the air, stretching nice and tall. Little back bend if you want, little side bend if you want. And then breathing your hands together down in front of your heart. Good. Letting your hands relax and then bowing forward, forward fold. Noticing your hips, what's your tendency here? And then breathing up, flat back. Breathing forward, forward fold. Breathing flat back. Breathing forward fold. Hands planted firmly on the ground, shoulders in neutral, hips in neutral. Breathe your left foot all the way back. You're going to keep the knee high. Again, gently pulling the left hip forward and the back hip slightly back so you're in neutral. And if you want to put your hands on your hips to feel what that feels like, do that. Then breathe your spine nice and long, your shoulders in neutral. Plant your left foot on the ground. Your left hand on the ground. Slightly in front of your inside of and in front of your right foot or wherever it's comfortable. And then begin to twist to the right, starting from the waist, the low back, the mid back, the upper back. Good. Letting your gaze rest wherever is comfortable without cranking the neck. Take a moment here and notice that often what we do here is drop the left hip. And that's okay, we're in a twist. But one thing you want to be doing is activating your left leg. So again, lifting up with the arch, all the way up into the quads, lifting up into the pelvis, and all the way up the spine. This is arches to crown, supporting the body. Good. If you want, you can raise the right arm to the ceiling. Noticing, what are you doing with your shoulders right here? Lots of space across the clavicles, across the collarbones. You can let the arm drop behind you if that feels good for you. Good. And then breathing your arm back down, untwisting. Good. So before we move, notice your shoulders, notice your hips. Move into neutral. Pressing down with the fingers. Breathe and lifting your foot and placing it back. Downward dog. Good. Again, noticing your hips, your shoulders. Then we're going to breathe forward into plank. Again, you can bend your elbows if that helps you keep your shoulders in neutral. Driving through the heels, lifting arches to crown. Good. And then lowering down. Really widening the shoulders here. When you're ready, breathing up, cobra. Breathing back down. One more, breathing up into cobra. Breathing back down. Excuse me, shoulders in neutral. Hips neutral, and then breathing up to plank. Good. Breathing back to downward dog. Good. Noticing your habits, noticing your tendencies. We're going to breathe our left foot up in the air, remembering to keep the toe pointing down and the hips neutral. This is not a twist. Good. Breathing your knee forward to your knee. Breathing your knee to chest. Good. What are you doing with your shoulders? And then breathing your foot back up into the sky. Good. Knee to chest again, paying attention to your shoulders, bending your elbows if it helps. One more time, foot to sky. Good. And then breathing your foot between your hands. Good. Again, gently pulling the hips together towards the center, towards neutral. Noticing the width of your shoulders, keeping them soft and low and neutral. Breathing the spine nice and long, planting the right hand inside of the left foot and slightly ahead, or wherever is most comfortable for you. And then beginning to breathe and twist to the left, starting with the waist, the low back, mid-back, the shoulders. Again, using the back leg, right? Lifting up, softly pulling into neutral. Good. And if you want to lift the left arm, you can. If you want to drop it behind you, whatever's comfortable for you today. Remembering to lift with that back leg. Awesome. Lifting the arm, circling it back down to the ground, coming out of the twist. Noticing your shoulders. We're going to step forward on our left leg, but before we do that, pulling your hips into neutral, putting your shoulders into neutral. Good. And then breathe, standing on the left foot, letting your right foot just kind of dangle behind you. Finding your balance here. And then breathing the back foot up into the air. Good. Toes pointing down. And if it feels good, lifting, your upper body flat. Good. Woo! You may notice some sides are easier than others. Sides. Okay. Coming down if you're ready. If you're like me and you're still wanting to play with it, that's fine too. Oh, there we go. Okay. Breathing both feet together. Everything neutral, breathing up the flat back. Breathing back down, forward fold. Breathing up the flat back. Breathing down, last time, forward fold. Good. Breathing all the way up, hands overhead. Stretching up. Any way you want. Good. Finally, breathing the hands together in front of the heart. Thanking yourself again for doing this practice, for creating this awareness. Check in for a moment also with your shoulders and your hips. Good. Letting your hands float down by your sides and taking this awareness with you. Whatever you do for the rest of your day, even if it's going to bed, what are your habits? What are your tendencies? And can you softly move into neutral or closer to neutral? Thank you very much. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. Enjoy.